Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. DeJoy, again, thank you for being here today. I just want to start off before asking some questions, just making it very clear that the men and women who work at the Postal Service, who check in every day to do their jobs, do it with professionalism, with integrity, and a passion to move the mail as quickly and as efficiently as possible. When I think of the postal workers, the mail handlers, the letter carriers, they're doing a great job. They are clearly essential workers each and every day. But as we've been going through this issue, and I've talked to many of those folks across my state, they have grown increasingly frustrated with some of the recent policies that have come in place, which they say is nothing that they've seen in the past. And they believe that mail has been piling up in ways that it shouldn't. And it needs to be addressed. But these are management changes. These are policy changes. It's not the men and women who are on the front line doing this work every day. So my question, so Postmaster General DeJoy, you've already heard me in my opening comments talking about the fact that I've received over 7,500 complaints from folks all across Michigan, but really across the country. Folks have sent in their concerns to me. Earlier in my opening statement, I shared some stories of hardships from folks, both Beth and Mary, their challenges in Michigan. So. And I think I heard this in the last answer. You acknowledge that some of the changes that were put in place have delayed the mail, and with a delay in mail, people can sometimes be hurt. Is that true?
Senator, first of all, I do recognize the quality capability of the American postal worker. That's one of the reasons that I'm here, is to help. As well as with regard to the Postal Service's key role in serving the American public. Yes, sir, I do recognize that some of these, there's been two changes. The organizational change has had I don't believe has any impact on what we've done. The transportation change, getting into compliance with our schedule.
Mr. Jordan, let me just jump. I don't want to mean to cut you off, but I'll get into those issues because I want you to elaborate a little bit further. But there have been delays. You'll recognize that. It's clear what we're seeing. Mail's been delayed, and I've spent over a month asking you to provide some documentation, kind of in my oversight function here in this committee, to how you made these decisions, what kind of analysis, what sort of data was put in place, and how that information impacted some of the changes you have. Your staff has repeatedly not answered those questions, and so certainly that transparency, I think, is unacceptable. What I have uncovered, though, from what little data is made public by the Postal Service, is on-time mail delivery. And I have my chart as well here too, which is from the Eastern Division. This is what you give to your business customers. And if you look at this line here, if it's probably hard to see, but there is a red line which you can see. Dipping dramatically. There's a flat line along the top of the chart, then it drops. Around July 11th, you start seeing the drop. July 18th, it falls dramatically. So that's a pretty big drop in on-time mail delivery that we are seeing. And I've asked for 3 times since July 17th for records relating to these service changes and how what I'm hearing from our letter carriers and postal workers and what I'm seeing in the chart that you actually post on your website, a significant drop of mail deliveries. And yet I don't get an answer. Will you commit to giving me these documents, which have to be readily available to the Postal Service by this Sunday? Can we get those documents to get a sense of what went into these decisions and what you're seeing in terms of mail delivery?
I will meet with our staff and get what documents with regard to this change. But the change, Senator, was to adhere to the transportation schedule. That was the change.
I would just, obviously you have all that documented. I'd love to see the documents as to how that was done, the data supporting that. And
if I can add, there's two, and certainly there was a slowdown in the mail when our production did not meet the schedule. But also, Senator, our employees are experiencing the COVID pandemic also, and we have a significant issue in employee availability in many parts of the country that are also leading to delays in delivery and mail.
Let me turn to your recent announcement that you made this week that you are suspending some of the changes that you had made over the last month. I believe the statement's fairly vague and it raises some additional questions. So I want to just be clear. These would be yes or no, just so we know exactly what was intended by that. Are you suspending your policy eliminating extra trips? Yes or no?
No, I did. First of all, the policy was not to eliminate extra trips. It was to mitigate extra trips.
Okay, so now to that. We're being told that you're limiting overtime, and this could possibly add to backlogs. Are you limiting overtime, or is that being suspended right now and people will work overtime if necessary to move the mail out efficiently every single day?
Senator, we never eliminated overtime. That's
it's been curtailed significantly, is what I understand.
It has not been curtailed by me or the leadership team here.
Curtailed significantly. It's gone down. It's been limited. Will you commit to
since I've been here, we've spent $700 million on overtime. Overtime runs at a 13% rate before I got here, and it runs at a 13% rate now. I did not.
If you have a policy, you can submit that to me. I'd appreciate it. Will you commit there will be no post office closures or suspensions before November 3rd?
I confirm post office closures was not a directive I gave. That was around before I got here. There's a process to that. When I found out about it, and it had the reaction that we did, I've suspended that until after the election.
Well, we've heard about the sorters. You addressed that earlier. Will you be bringing back any mail sorting machines that have been removed since you've become Postmaster General? Will any of those come back?
There's no intention to do that. They're not needed, sir.
So you will not bring back any processors?
They're not needed, sir.
Okay. I've got questions about independence and transparency. Prior to implementing the changes that you put forth in the postal system, did you discuss those changes, or are there a potential impact on the November election with the president or anyone at the White House? And remind you, you're under oath.
I have never spoken to the president about the Postal Service other than to congratulate me when I accepted the position.
Did you speak or discuss any of these changes with Secretary Mnuchin?
During the discussion and negotiating the note, I told him I'm working on a plan, but I never discussed the changes that I made. I just said I'm working on a plan to improve service and gain cost efficiencies. But no grave detail other than that was about it.
Prior to implementing the changes, did you discuss these changes or their impact on the election with any Trump campaign officials?
No, sir. These changes and our total analysis here and going forward, and remember, I'm one new person in the organization with the whole structure around me, an operating structure, an executive team around me that are involved in these decisions. Okay, and moving forward, trying to have any negative impact on the election is an outrageous claim.
Just one final one. Did you ever, Mr. Chairman, did you ever discuss any of this with Mark Meadows? Any of these changes that you've done? You've never had discussion since you...
I haven't discussed anything with Mark Meadows. I haven't spoken to Mark Meadows up until maybe last week was the first time I spoke to him in a while.
So finally, you will give us your word today under oath that you have not taken any action whatsoever in your capacity as Postmaster General for any political reason or at the suggestion of any administration officials.
Sir, I will tell you my first election mail meeting, what I instructed the organization, the whole team around us and out in the field, whatever efforts we will have, double them. I was greatly concerned about all the political noise that we were hearing, and I've had weekly reviews on this since before this all the excitement came out. We are very committed. The board's committed. The postal workers committed. The union leadership is committed to having a successful election, and the insinuation is quite frankly outrageous.
Just one final thing, Mr. Chairman, just is that as we get into the election now, there has been concern that I'm hearing from state and local governments about first-class mail. Do you have your word that you're not going to mandate that states send out any ballots using either the more expensive first-class mail? And will you continue the processes and procedures to allow election mail to move as expeditiously as possible and treat it like first class?
Yes, sir. we will deploy processes and procedures that advance any election mail, in some cases ahead of first-class mail.
Okay, they won't charge local governments for the first-class mail. They can continue the process that they've done in the past.
I don't get to charge anybody, but no, we're not going to change any. We're not going to change any rates.
Great. Thank you for the time. Thank you for the indulgence, Mr. Chairman, for the extra time. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Senator Peters. Now, we did allow 7-minute rounds. Both Senator Peters and I went a little over. We're going to adhere to the 7 minutes to other members. The order of questioning will be Senator Portman, Carper, Langford, Hassan, Scott, Rosen, and then Senator Portman.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you and to Senator Peters for holding the hearing. It's very important. It's timely. Obviously, all of us want to see our Postal Service work and work well. And let me just give a shout out to David Janis, who's our letter carrier, and to all the letter carriers and all the postal workers, because I do think particularly during this pandemic, they're more appreciated than ever. And so the men and women who you lead, Mr. DeJoy, please pass along to them our thanks. I like having this hearing now because I think there's been a lot of misinformation out there, and I like getting to the facts. One of the facts I've learned this morning is that you started 67 days ago, and much of what we've been talking about in the media, at least, including the blue boxes and the sorting machines, that happened before you got there, and it was part of a plan. I knew the former Postmaster General. She came up through the ranks, was not a political person at all. And anyway, that's helpful to know that that's what's going on. It's also helpful to know that you were appointed by the Postal Board of Governors and that's a bipartisan group. In fact, we confirmed those people. And it was a unanimous selection. And I guess it's based on your being a logistics expert. And just hearing you this morning, I can tell you got a passion for the logistics side of things. I also know that the long-term financial picture for the post office, Postal Service is not pretty. And by the way, that's been true for a long, long time. And that's not really something that a Postmaster General can do much about. It requires legislation. Senator Collins, Senator Feinstein have a bill as an example right now that provides for some reforms and some additional funding. Everybody knows it's in trouble. Everybody knows we've got to deal with this issue. And so, although I'm going to ask you some tough questions and others will, really a lot of this comes back onto Congress and not doing its job in terms of the longer term financial picture. But the immediate issue is to be sure that these elections work well. And I appreciate the fact that you said this morning that that's going to be your top priority between now and the election. Every one of us on this panel, I hope, want to be sure that we have the ability to have an election that is well run, where people have their votes counted. And many are going to be using the Postal Service. Let me start, Mr. DeJoy, by just asking you a general question. Do you support absentee voting, and do you support voting by mail generally?
I'm going to vote by mail. Yes. I voted by mail for a number of years. The Postal Service will deliver every ballot and process every ballot in time that it receives.
Well, I appreciate that. So you do support voting by mail?
I do. That's interesting. I think the American public should be able to vote by mail, and the Postal Service will support it. So I guess that's yes.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, the states are going to decide this, not the Congress or not the post office, and many states are going to do it. I mean, in Ohio, we've had absentee voting for a couple decades now. That's no fault, meaning that you don't have to give a reason, and it works quite well. I vote every year by absentee because I don't know where the heck I'm going to be in Washington or in Ohio based on our schedule. So it's worked well. And, we also are going to have in Ohio a lot of other ways for people to vote. We're going to be sure that it's easy to vote in Ohio, and it's hard to cheat in Ohio. And I think that's the important thing. There's been a lot of news coverage about the Postal Service sending letters to 46 states, including Ohio and D.C., to let them know they can't guarantee all ballots cast by mail will arrive on time. Is this due to a lack of funding, which is what many are saying, or is it due to state laws on voting and the time it takes to turn around receiving and delivering the ballots?
Senator, this was not a change from anything that we have done in previous years. It was just more more detail and more emphasis put on it, partly because of the expected rise in vote by mail and also the pandemic. And what the team set out to do is make the election boards and then eventually the American public pretty simple, what our processes were. And therefore, to guarantee that if you follow these processes, there was no extra Herculean efforts on our part to get your ballot in, which therefore mitigated the risk of it potentially not getting there. Yeah. So mailing.
Well, I think that's important to note that this is something that has been a problem for years, including previous elections. You sent out warnings in previous elections. And look, I think the post office has got to coordinate better with state election systems. I think state election systems has got to coordinate better with the post office. Mm-hmm. I mean, in Ohio, as an example, the time frame between when you can cast your ballot and when it is postmarked, and you can get a ballot as late as Saturday before the election, and to get that to the post office and back to you, and then date stamp before Monday, is very hard to do logistically. I think that's one of the things that your letter pointed out was to these state systems, be sure and leave adequate time. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir. First of all, it was not my letter. It was a letter from our general counsel. But yeah, pointing out all the different variations that we could experience and how fast we could process it. But yes, there are times we get the ballots. Ballots were sent out the day before the election. It's almost impossible for the voter to vote, for the ballot to get to the voter, for the voter to vote, and for it to get back in time for the election. So this was a very, very well thought out effort to safeguard the election, not to get in the way of safeguard the processing of ballots, not to get in the way of it.
What advice would you give voters? This is an opportunity for you to speak to the voters of Ohio and the country. Would you advise them to wait till the last minute, or would you advise them to leave at least a week?
The general word around here is vote early. Vote early.
I think that's really important to tell people because, again, under Ohio's law and a lot of other laws, the time frame is really close. If you request an absentee ballot, you got to be sure that it can be delivered in time. I am concerned about the delays that we have seen in Ohio and elsewhere. We have a number of veterans who've contacted us and said they weren't able to get their medication, and there's some just heartbreaking stories. One is a 70-year-old served in Vietnam, has COPD, has trouble breathing. The inhaler refill was mailed through the Postal Service due to delays. He ran out of it while waiting for it to arrive. And then his insurance said, you know what? We're not going to pay for another refill to be filled because it's already been shipped through the Postal Service. And he can't afford to pay for another emergency refill personally. Let me ask you about that, particularly the veterans' medications that are shipped through the mail. Are you focused on that issue, and what can we do to correct that problem?
Senator, first of all, we are working here feverishly to get the system running at stability, and also to get hire more workers to handle the delivery process. And it is we're all feel bad about what the dip in our service level has been. We serve 161 million people. We still deliver at 99.5% of the time. We have significant efforts to continue to improve on that process, and everybody is working here feverishly to get that right.
Well, I hope you will, and let's ensure these medications are delivered in time, and be sure that when the production doesn't meet the transportation schedule, as you said earlier, that there is some efforts made to align those two, because it's a lifeline for people, all over the country, particularly in our rural areas. And I thank you for your service and for the answers you've given today.
Okay, thanks, Senator Portman. Again, I want to just remind our committee members, please keep your questioning as well as factor in the answer to try and keep within those 7 minutes. Senator Carper. Is Senator Carper there? We'll move on to Senator Langford.
Oh, fuck.
Oh,
Mr. Chairman, I think Senator Carper is there. I think he's
Okay.
trying to be able to cue it all up
Okay.
right now.
Senator Carper, can you unmute?
I'm unmuted.
Okay, there we go. We don't want to be on TV again.
Thanks so much for scheduling this hearing. I urged you to do this 3 weeks ago. You agreed to do it, and I'm grateful that you have. To the Postmaster General, thank you for finally returning my call. I called you for like 3 weeks, trying to get you to return my call after you taken office. Thank you for finally returning our call and talking with us last week. You know, you might be wondering, Mr. DeJoy, why there's some question and skepticism here. I've seen in my own office on constituent service, we get a constituent services report every week. We've seen a steady upgrade and increase in concerns, complaints about Postal Service. And it's not just my office, it's Senate offices and House offices all over the country. And frankly, they coincided with the time that you took office. Even this morning, I just got a message from Joe Manchin, Senator from West Virginia. Been earlier this week in the Charleston Mail Distribution Center, talking about how all this equipment, sorting equipment, has been taken out. They serve 5 states from out of that place. And so it's not just a little Delaware, it's all over the country. Maybe it's just a coincidence. I'm not so sure. But here's why we're skeptical. We got a president who doesn't want to have vote by mail. We got a president who'd like to suppress the vote. We got a president who would like to see the Postal Service not do well. I worked for almost 20 years on this committee to try to make sure we have a vibrant, active, meaningful Postal Service. You come from Greensboro, North Carolina, just north of, just south of where I grew up in Danville, Virginia. We had voter suppression in this country almost from the get-go. Even though our first Postmaster General, Benjamin Franklin, said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to let everybody have, freedom and right to choose their own votes. It hadn't been that way. Women didn't get to vote. Blacks didn't get to vote. We still have voter suppression. The last congressional election they had in North Carolina, you know what happened? Half the people voted for Democratic candidates for Congress. Do you know how many Democrats were elected out of 13 seats? 3. I mean, we have seen poll taxes, we have seen literacy tests, all this stuff. And when I see what's going on with the president who wants to degrade the Postal Service, wants to get rid of vote by mail, you shouldn't be surprised that we're alarmed when we see the kind of degraded service that we're seeing across the country. It wasn't that long ago, we had an overnight mail service in the metropolitan area. It wasn't that long ago, we had from coast to coast mail delivered within 3 days. And we don't have that anymore. So people should be, if people seem skeptical, they have a right to be skeptical. I want to just say, after the public uproar that we've seen here in my state and other states about delays and failure to deliver the mail, you've committed to freeze additional operational changes until after the election. Good. But we're going to need more information than that, especially given reports that came out last night showing that you and your team are actually considering more extreme changes than those we've seen to date, including changes that will slow down the mail even further, post office and plant closings, massive service reductions to Alaska, Hawaii, and Puerto Rico, making mail more expensive to the U.S. citizens living there, price changes that would nearly double the cost for price changes that would double the cost of voting by mail, dramatic price hikes on packages that will disproportionately impact small businesses in rural communities that rely on the Postal Service while erasing your competitive advantage over FedEx and UPS. We need to be worried about this, and I am. I don't ask a lot of yes or no questions. I'm going to ask a couple today, and I'd ask you just give me a simple yes or no answer. We'll have an opportunity in the responses for the record to expand on those, but I'm going to ask you for yes or no answers. Yes or no, are you considering the dramatic service changes that I just outlined, which we've just learned about in the last 48 hours? Are you considering those dramatic service changes? Just yes or no?
Senator, there's a dramatic
I'm asking for a yes or no answer.
We're considering dramatic changes to improve the service to the American people. Yes.
Yes or no, will you restore the mail collection and processing capacity that the Postal Service has lost in recent weeks during your tenure?
Senator, as I said, I did not direct that. I directed it. I stopped it. It's insignificant. It's not material to anything that we do, and we're sticking with where we're at right now.
Recently, the president was caught red-handed when he admitted to not wanting the Postal Service to have additional resources because the Postal Service would use these resources to enable election mail. And when asked about providing necessary relief, the president stated, quote, if we don't make a deal, that is a deal with the Congress, that means they don't get the money, they being the Postal Service. That means they don't get universal mail-in voting. They just can't have it. No wonder we're somewhat skeptical and dubious. My understanding is you have had more than a passing acquaintance with this president. My understanding, you've been a huge supporter financially of the president. My understanding is when we were going to have a convention in Charlotte, North Carolina, you were heavily involved in leading the raising of money for that convention. No wonder we're a little bit skeptical about this when we have a president talking down the Postal Service, talking down vote by mail. Another yes or no, and you can expand on the record on this. Yes or no? Will you remain independent of the president of this administration and make service decisions that support the American people first? Will you? That's services that support the American people having fast, efficient, and affordable mail service, especially with regard to mail-in ballots. Will you remain independent of this administration? That's it. Will you remain independent?
Yes, will remain independent of this.
Thank you very much. Mr. DeJoy, during our call earlier this week, you said that you supported additional cash assistance for the Postal Service. So do we. The Postal Service has, $15 billion of roughly cash on hand and a new $10 billion line of credit that comes with some very troubling conditions dictated by the administration. The Postal Service has had massive declines in first-class mail. We know that. It averaged 15-20% below last year's first-class mail volume. The Postal Service package volume is higher, though. The normal one has sustained it through the pandemic. My guess is those volumes will come down somewhat after the pandemic. All this is to say the Postal Service's $15 billion in cash balance could quickly disappear, and I believe the Post Office needs to approve the Board of Governors' $15 billion request from earlier this year to cover loss to COVID. Last yes or no question. Do you support the federal appropriation to the Postal Service to cover its COVID-related losses? Yes or no? Do you support the federal appropriation to the Postal Service to cover its COVID-related losses?
Yes. COVID-related losses I do support.
Thank you very much. Mr. Postmaster General, my family's had a heavy military involvement throughout our lives. I'm a last Vietnam veteran serving in the United States Senate. My mother's youngest brother died in a kamikaze attack in 1944 on his aircraft carrier in the Western Pacific. He gave his life for this country. My grandmother's the Gold Star mother. We have my father's a veteran. I'm a veteran. We have generation after generation of Americans who have been willing to risk their lives, lay down their lives, so we will have the right to vote. We got a lot of people who are sick and afraid of going out and voting this year because they don't want to stand in lines and come down with a virus that could take their life. This is a serious matter. And I just want you to urge you to work with us, not like be apart from us, not return our calls, work with us as we attack the needs to build the kind of postal service that we can all be proud of. Thanks very much.
Senator Langford.
Chairman, thank you. Mr. DeJoy, thank you for your service. From what I've heard so far today, apparently the post office never had any issues. There was never any delays. There was never any mail that was late. There were never any financial problems. There was never any challenge to mail-in votings until 65 days ago when you arrived. And then apparently all chaos has broken out in the post office in the last 2 months. But before that, there seemed to be no complaint about the post office ever. So I do want to thank you for your service. I want to thank the men and women that are around the country that do a remarkable job every day. Those folks in the unions, those folks that are taking care of us and getting things out, getting medicine, taking care of first-class mail, taking care of all those things. So I appreciate your service. I appreciate the fact that you have stepped up to be able to help lead an organization that desperately needs some help, that Congress has for 2 decades pounded on postmasters on why they are not doing reforms and why we haven't found more efficiencies. You've stepped into this role and have taken looks like the work from the Inspector General, the work from the Regulatory Commission, and have said, let's start implementing some of these things. And now Congress seems to be shifting from beating up on postmasters for not doing work to now beating up on you for actually doing the work. So I do want to say thanks for stepping up and taking the risk to actually take this on. So I do want to run through several questions. Some of them have not been addressed yet. There was a series of stories that came out and a trending on social media that you were locking up the post boxes in Burbank to prevent people from voting. Were you locking up the boxes in Burbank to keep people from voting?
Senator, the stories that I have heard of my ability and the places I'm able to get to in the same day are just remarkable. So no, I'm not locking up any. I would have nothing to do with collection boxes.
So you mentioned earlier that it's been 35,000 of the blue boxes that have been retired over the past 10 years. So apparently any blue boxes that have been retired over the past 10 years are your responsibility over the last 65 days. You had mentioned before about some of the blue boxes being retired. Are they still going to be retired between now and the election, or will they be retired in the future?
Now, my commitment to the committee and the leadership and the American people is we stopped. We have, the day I put the statement out, we directed everybody to stop stop reducing postal hours, stop bringing back collection boxes, stop shutting down machines, and that was basically what we did. So from now
so
until
yes, yeah, you stopped that until the election. Will that pick back up after the election? Because one of the issues that you brought up before was about the sorting machines. Some of these sorting machines are older. Some of the sorting machines are not needed anymore. Will that just stop forever? What I'm trying to figure out is, are we still going to work on trying to build in efficiencies in the post office? This has been an issue for a long time to try to get us back into balance.
Senator, right now, thank you for the opportunity. Right now, the legislation is that we deliver to 161 million addresses 6 days a week. I'm committed to that. I believe that's the strength of the Postal Service. And that we be self-sustaining. Those are the two pieces of legislation that I'm working towards. We are not self-sustained. We have a $10 billion shortfall, and we'll continue to have, over the next 10 years, we'll have a $245 billion shortfall. So we need to, and our management team and our board there is a path that we are planning. Okay, with the help of some legislation, with some cost impacts, with some new revenue strategies, and that will help and some pricing freedom from the PRC. We believe we have a plan to do that. But one thing that's not in the plan is not doing anything after the election. It is an ambitious plan because we have $10 billion to bridge. Now, the plan has not been finalized. We have hundreds of initiatives we look like take the Alaska bypass plan, the discussion. That's an item on the table. That's an unfunded mandate. It costs us like $500 million a year. And if I'm not saying what I asked for is all the unfunded mandates, right? That's a way for us to get healthy, pay something for the unfunded mandates. If we just throw $25 billion at us this year and we don't do anything, we'll be back in 2 years. Then maybe we should change the legislation and not make us be self-sustaining. But as a leadership team and a board, that's what our mission is, to be self-sustaining and deliver at a high level of precision. And I'm committed to both. And I think both can be done with a little help from the Congress and from the Postal Regulatory Commission.
Well, Congress has been unwilling to be able to act on this for a very long time. It's been over a decade. Congress has discussed any kind of reforms in the post office, but it always seems to boil down to, will that change distribution areas that may or may not be needed in a state that I live in, or will it change any other post office structure that I'm familiar with? And if it changes my area, then I want to be able to block it. And so it has been a great challenge. I've also heard from multiple folks saying the post office has now so severely cut that they can't meet the capacity to actually get ballots out. And folks in rural areas and folks in urban areas, will they be able to get ballots out? I've seen your letter. That was the same as the letter in 2016 the post office sent out saying, hey, be advised, states, you need to send things out early. That's helpful. Thanks for actually doing that. And you shouldn't be criticized for that. You should be encouraged to be able to do that. But my question is, folks have challenged me and said there's not going to be enough capacity for elections. Will you have enough capacity again for Christmas and for Mother's Day? Because my understanding is Christmas and Mother's Day are the biggest capacity times for first-class mail. Do you have capacity now for Christmas and Mother's Day?
So we have, yes, we have capacity for Christmas and Mother's Day. So
I actually went back and looked last year, the week of December the 16th, the post office delivered 2.5 billion pieces of first-class mail just that 1 week of December the 16th of last year. That's a pretty remarkable feat to get 2.5 billion pieces of first-class mail delivered in one single week. So you know right now you have enough capacity to be able to handle the elections without slowing it down.
Yes, sir, and it's more than that. Besides just the capacity, the intent, the extra activities that the whole organization is going through between our postal union leaders, our board, the executive management team here, we are focused on, besides just having the capacity to execute, to react to whatever conditions exist at that particular point in time, up to and including the pandemic, which likely will still be having some impacts. So I think the American people can feel comfortable that the Postal Service will deliver on this election.
Thank you. Thanks, Senator Langford. Senator Hassan.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ranking Member Peters, for having this hearing. And thank you, Mr. DeJoy, for your willingness to appear before our committee today. My time is short this morning, and because I've been told you won't be staying for a second round of questions, I'd appreciate brief responses. Mr. DeJoy, I sent you a letter last week detailing stories from Granite Staters about delays in their mail. And I will note a huge spike in calls to my office since mid-July about the Postal Service and delays. For so many of our service members, veterans, people who experience disabilities, and rural Americans, their local post office is their lifeline. And I'll note that the change in volume you are seeing doesn't change the need for timely delivery of the essential, necessary items that the American public relies on the post office for. For example, one Manchester couple fills prescriptions through their VA benefits, and they wrote, quote, "There has been a noticeable slowdown in mail delivery. Mail delays have caused me to ration my medication. I start cutting back on my dosage to half pills or skipping alternate days to make them last. Some of my pills are crucial. My cardiac and diabetic meds need to be on a strict protocol. Will you ensure that any further changes that you make to postal operations do not delay access to medications and other necessities, yes or no?"
Yes, Senator, and I look forward to working with you on legislation to help this type of service not reach into the future.
Well, thank you. Now, I want to move to elections again. I am glad for some of the statements and actions you have taken. We all know how important voting by mail is usually, and this year even more so. Some states are starting to mail out general election ballots on September 4th, just 2 weeks from today. You and the Postal Service General Counsel have written letters that we've talked about this morning about your plans to deal with election mail. You wrote last week that the Postal Service will, quote, "utilize additional resources and maximize our efforts during the 10 days prior to the election to ensure the processing and delivery of all election mail within our system." Do the letters that you and the General Counsel have sent to Congress so far contain your full plan for ensuring the processing and delivery of all election mail? Or do you have a more detailed operational plan for the additional resources and efforts you alluded to?
The letter that's been sent to the states from General Counsel speaks about, complying mail classifications and how they process.
Right, Mr. DeJoy, I'm just wondering, do you have a detailed plan about how you're going to ensure the kind of delivery that Americans count on for voting by mail? Do you have a more detailed plan than what's in your letter? Yes or no?
There are detailed processes that we are going through. And there are going to be expanded plans to that. We've just announced the expanded committee, election committee within the operation, and our board has established one. But there are detailed plans that we go through in every election. And with regard
to, could you share those again? Could you share those with Congress? And could you share them by Sunday night so we can see what they are, please?
I don't think I will have the complete plan by Sunday night. We're just putting these committees together. But I can share you. We can try and. Today's Friday. I have to check, and we'll get back to you.
All right. I would appreciate them by Sunday night if possible. By the end of next week, as I noted, September 4th, some of the ballots are going to start going out. Last year, the Postal Service Inspector General interviewed managers in postal facilities across the country about handling elections. The Inspector General found that facilities typically process political mail as first-class mail, delivering more than 95% of election mail with 1 to 3 days for the 2018 midterms. Yes or no, will you commit to the goal of delivering at least 95% of election mail within 1 to 3 days this year, the same as the Postal Service did in 2018?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Now I want to move on to the issue of the decommissioning of sorting machines. At the Manchester Processing and Distribution Facility in my state, 4 sorting machines have been taken out of service. 3 of them are just sitting there, and I'm told that 1 of them has been dismantled and sold to a company in Pennsylvania for scrap metal. The Manchester facility only has 1 other machine that can do the work of the machine that has been sold for scrap. If that machine fails, like it did yesterday when I was talking to postal workers in my state, sorting stops and mail is delayed until the machine can be fixed. Although you've suspended the removal of sorting machines, the removed machines in Manchester have yet to be brought back in service or replaced. And you've said today that it isn't necessary to do that, and there aren't any plans to do that. In fact, I understand that the Director of Maintenance Operations, Kevin Couch, sent an email on Tuesday directing local maintenance managers not to reconnect machines. Yes or no, is that true?
I have no idea about that, ma'am. Those maintenance operations still, they're maintenance operations within the districts. This whole process was new to me last week. I'm sure there's logic behind what it is. I can find out about that. We'll be happy to get
okay. So you've already said, though, today that it's not necessary. But look, when we have only 1 machine that can do a certain kind of sorting in our largest distribution center in the state of New Hampshire, and it breaks and everything has to stop till it gets fixed again, that's not efficient. That delays delivery. And what I would like to get from you is a plan to make sure that you will commit to making sure that postal workers can deliver every piece of mail that comes into the distribution center on the same day it gets in there, which has been the practice in the past. By refusing to restart or replace these machines, you're really sabotaging the Postal Service's ability to sort mail efficiently, and you're undermining postal workers' commitment to that everyday delivery. So will you commit to having your team look into this and get back to me in writing about what the plan is to get at least some of these decommissioned machines back up and running?
Yes. Well, first, Senator, I don't agree with the premise, but I will comply with your request.
Well, thank you. And it would be helpful to get a response by the end of the week. And finally, I will just, because I see that I am running out of time, I will ask a question for the record because there are growing concerns that postal workers are being retaliated against when they speak to their members of Congress or to the press about some of the shortages that they are seeing, or some of the delays they're seeing, some of the sabotage and undermining of timely delivery that they are seeing. And I want to make sure that postal workers who are speaking to protect the interests of the American public that they serve with such diligence are not retaliated against for doing so. Can I have your commitment today that they will not be retaliated against for doing so?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Scott.
Sure. Thank you, Chairman Johnson, for holding this hearing today. Thank you, Postmaster General DeJoy, for being here. In Florida, we've had vote by mail for a long time, and it's worked really well. And I think the post office in Florida has done a great job in making sure it's worked. I've had 3 elections, and everyone, they've worked hard to make it happen. Mr. DeJoy, can you just talk about why you're uniquely qualified and what background you bring to being Postmaster General, and why you were picked by the board of the Postal Service?
Thank you, Senator. I mean, there's 2 things, and you could look at, the 2 actions, the big actions that I've taken. I mean, the board will have to speak for their evaluation of me, but I have done I think one of the things they like is my experience with large logistical transformations. I've done back in the 90s, over a $3 billion transformation of the postal network regarding mail transport equipment. I've done big projects for Boeing, big projects for Disney, big projects for transformational projects for Verizon. So that particular, type of experience, I think, impressed them. And my commitment to public service, I think, impressed them. My engagement in community and in the nation. When you look at the steps that I made, I didn't come in here with a team. I didn't bring in consultants. I worked with the existing management team to create an organization that would look to move forward and give us self-help and drive improvements in our service, drive costs out of the system, and grow revenues. And that is something that I've done all my life. I built a big business from nothing. People, there's some accusations that this is not a business, but when you have to deliver service and you have to be sustainable, the operating model needs to cover its costs. There is no other answer to that than that, and we need to take actions to do that. And I have great experience at that. And part of, I think, why they like me is because I have a plan. I have a plan for the success of the Postal Service. I believe in the 6 day. I believe the 6 day a week delivery is an important aspect, a strength in us. Now, our pieces per delivery are down under 3 now. From years ago, 6 or 7. Our goal is to get that back up. We cover, if you looked on a chart and look at what our reach is on a daily basis, it is impressive. And we need to drive our costs out of and this is well known. This is study. We need to drive our costs out of the network, get more efficient within our network, and get more pieces into our carriers' hands. And that's the success. Along with legislative help, that will be the future success for the Postal Service as we face a new economy.
So, Mr. DeJoy, in your business life, did you have to perform for your customer? Did you have to be on time, and were you able to do that?
Sir, our contracts had 99.98% performance metrics on everything we did. Yes, and I think the attitude and the energy is here at the Postal, and the desire is here at the Postal Service to do that. I just think that we haven't had the alignment and the expectation of that, and that's something that I bring to the table.
So, are you? You personally committed to doing everything you can to make sure the mail is delivered on time and people get, whether it's their medicine or their ballot, that they get it as quickly as they can, with realistic expectations?
Yes, sir, I am.
All right. So how does it make you feel when you have people out here that make these unsubstantiated claims that you personally have a goal to slow down the mail so ballots don't get to election offices on time, that you want to suppress the vote, that you personally are interested in damaging the ability of the post office to do their job?
Sir, that does not deter me at all. And I am unbelievably proud and humbled by the number of positive comments I get from employees, the management team, and the people from around America on my initiatives. It is really a farce to believe that we can sit here and do nothing.
Yep. Do you feel like you need a massive federal bailout to be able to deliver the mail on election day?
No, I do not need a massive. I don't need anything to deliver a mail on election night. But we do need legislative reform. We do need the freedom from the change in the PRC regulation, and we do need to be reimbursed for our costs. When you look at during the COVID during the pandemic, we still delivered to 99% of the American homes where other business with no revenue. The American postal worker was out there. This organization continued to perform, and this is why we have such high ratings. Well, our revenues were down. Other organizations would have stopped going into some of these rural areas and so forth. We continue to do what we're supposed to do, and at a significant cost impact. And I'm one to try and get to a sustainable model. But in this case, I believe we deserve some compensation for it.
Well, one thing I think a lot of us would like to be able to do, if we're going to provide more funding to the post office, that I'd like to work with you and others to find out what are the things that we ought to do to make the changes necessary to make sure that you can do your job in the future. So I appreciate any information you could provide that would allow us to do that. And I just want to thank you for your commitment. I want to thank all the people that work at the post office. They work hard. But I appreciate your background, your commitment to excellence, and I hope you can do the same thing over time at the post office. Thank you, Chairman Johnson.
Thanks, Senator Scott. Senator Rosen.
Thank you, Chairman Johnson, for holding this meeting here today. And thank you, Mr. DeJoy, for making yourself available. Before I ask some further questions, I want to ask the Postmaster General, I'd like to ask you this. We need transparency in the changes you've been making and in everything that you've discussed here today. Will you commit to providing this committee with any and all transcripts or minutes of all closed, non-public Board of Governor meetings from this year by this Sunday? Can you commit to that, sir?
No.
You will not commit to provide minutes?
I don't know. I don't have the authority to do some of those things, and that is something that I would need to discuss with counsel and the board's counsel. So I can't commit to that.
Well, we'll be discussing that with you, but let's move on. We have limited time. Before I go with the rest of my questions, I do want to thank the dedicated postal workers across this nation, particularly here in my state of Nevada. I spoke with many of them yesterday. Majority of them veterans in their family. They have done years of dedicated service to this country, to this nation, and they are very concerned. So, Mr. DeJoy, earlier this year, you've acknowledged you've made operational changes to the Postal Service. You removed mail sorting machines. You've had elimination of overtime and late trips. In Las Vegas, where we're expecting mail volume to ramp up soon, our postal workers, the ones I spoke with yesterday, are reporting the removal of sorting machine from our general mail facility, which is actually right down the street from my house. As a former programmer and systems analyst, I have a real strong appreciation for the data. So I want to talk about the data that you use to create these policies and what you may or may not have analyzed before you've made these changes. During the pandemic, health officials, we've directed older Americans to stay at home for their own safety. That means for our seniors in Nevada and across the country, Postal Service is the only way they're going to receive their critical items. Life-saving prescription, household supplies, Social Security checks. For veterans, my colleagues have already mentioned this. It's a lifeline. 80% of veterans' prescriptions are filled by the United States Postal Service. I have 225,000 veterans in Nevada, many of them relying on this for their timely delivery of life-saving medication. And in small towns across Nevada, from Gabbs, who has a population of 269 people, to Shores, it's a tribal community with 658 people. Some of my larger rural communities, that's all they get is the Postal Service. So please, could you answer yes or no? Effort of time. Before developing and implementing policy changes since assuming your role this year, did you conduct any specific analysis on how your changes would impact seniors? Yes or no, sir?
So, ma'am, the policy changes that I...
Yes or no, sir?
The policy changes that I embarked upon were not the ones that you identified in your.
So you didn't do any analysis to see how seniors would be impacted. Okay, let's move on. Did you do an analysis to see how veterans might be impacted, knowing that so many of our postal workers are veterans? We employ so many veterans that they aren't getting their medication and that they rely on 80%. Did you do a specific analysis to see how veterans would be impacted?
The only change that I made, ma'am, was that the trucks leave on time. Theoretically, everyone should have got their mail faster.
So can you look me in the eye and all the Nevada veterans in the eye, all the Nevada seniors in the eye, and tell us that you will not continue in the policies in the future that you know that will harm my seniors, my veterans here in Nevada, and all of our seniors and veterans across this nation? Can you look us in the eye and commit to being sure that they have on-time delivery?
Well, I'm working towards on-time delivery, ma'am. Yes, I can commit to that.
Thank you. And so did you do any analysis about the fees if mail is late, the late fees that people would get when they paid their rent or their car payment or their utility bill if the mail is slowed down, and the impact that the charges and those fees would have on working families? Is there any analysis about the impact of late delivery by you on that, sir? Yes or no, please?
The analysis that we did was that if we moved the mail on schedule, that all late deliveries would have been improved. That's the analysis.
Well, obviously that isn't the case, so we need to continue this.
For a variety of reasons.
Did you, our deployed service members routinely cast their ballots by mail. Did you specifically analyze how your policy changes would impact our servicemen and women across this country and across the globe, how your changes would impact them, sir?
Senator, the analysis we did would show that we would improve service to every constituent.
So that's great. So can you provide me by this Sunday, if I understand you correctly, you have an analysis that will show that this should have improved it, although we are finding out through thousands and thousands of contacts to our office, to our connections, that it has not been the case. So this is frankly unacceptable, and I would like to see the analysis that this was based on to our offices by this Sunday. Can you commit to that, sir?
No, ma'am.
Can you commit to providing it to us at all, sir?
I will get back to you on that.
You cannot commit to providing the American people the analysis that you use to base your decisions on about their very important medications, their Social Security checks, and all the other things. You won't commit to the American people to be transparent?
Senator, I will go back and get the truck schedule, the analysis that designed the truck schedule that I directed
Can you commit to transparency, sir? That's all I'm asking.
Very transparent.
Then
yes,
that means that you would provide us your analysis. If you're transparent, then ergo, that means you will provide us the data that you use to base these important decisions that impact people's lives. I want you to look in the camera. There are millions of people watching who are impacted every day by what you do. And please understand that. And so I want you to commit to the American people to transparency and provide us with the data that has been used to create these decisions.
Ma'am, I do not accept the premise, and I will provide you with the transportation schedule that I directed the organization to adhere to. Yes, I will do that.
Well, we appreciate that. I look forward to seeing that. I look forward to having future discussions with you. Thank you. My time is up.
Is Senator Paul available?
Yes. Do you have me?
Senator Paul, yep, we can hear you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. DeJoy, for your testimony, and thank you for taking what sounds like an often thankless job full of partisan rancor, and thanks for bringing your business acumen to something that really, probably from my opinion, is almost an impossible problem, short of legislative reform. And even with legislative reform, I see it as almost an impossibility how we'd actually balance the annual operating losses, where you weren't running a loss every year. $8 to $9 billion a year is an enormous loss. And I've been of the opinion, basically, we shouldn't give you any more money unless it's attached to reform. That's the only leverage we have. When the post office becomes desperate for money, we should attach things they don't want to necessarily do. Less employees, We started that a few years ago. We've got to do more of it. The mail keeps dropping. You've got to have less employees. That's where your legacy costs are too. Over time, you'll catch up on that, but we've got to go to less employees over time. We also need to look at the easiest way to continue personalized service to each person individually at their house would be to do it less frequently. And frankly, people who live 20 miles down a shell road, if you told them they were going to get it twice a week versus 6 times a week, I think we'd actually live with this. I grew up in a town of 13,000 people. I still live in a small town. I really think people could live with that, but people should be told of the problem of continuing to run massive deficits, not just in the post office, but throughout government. And that really we shouldn't pass money out like it's candy. We should send it attached to specific reforms. Could you list some of the legal impediments you have? You're a businessman. If you came in as a venture capitalist and a venture capitalist group took over the post office and named you CEO, what would you do that you're unable to do because it's a government entity now? What are the governmental or legal restraints that prevent you from actually fixing the $8 to $9 billion annual loss that the post office has?
Well, thank you, Senator, for the opportunity to address that. I'm a little bit more optimistic than you in terms of our ability to meet, at least get to a close point of break even. Number one, the legislative reform that I would ask is what I said in my written testimony and opening remarks on integration of Medicaid and reform, pension reform. I would like to be kind of liberated on pricing it's a very, very competitive market out there now. I would like more pricing freedom. I would drive, that would help us. I would like some of our unfunded mandates addressed with. And then within the organization, I would be able, without as much fanfare, to do a simple thing like, say, adhere to our schedules, right? And if we adhere to our schedules, that will improve performance. In transition, there would be an issue, but and we're seeing that recover right now. And once we get mail and packages moving at 97% with trucks that are moving at 97% on time, and we're driving costs out of the system by doing that. That's what I would do in my own business. And in my own business, I would grab new business revenue generating ideas, which we have here, that will drive billions of dollars of contribution to the cost to serve the American people. So we are in the beginning of having a plan. I'm an optimist about trying to pull this off.
I won't ask you your opinion on going from 6 days to 5 days, because that's really the job of Congress. But that's estimated to save $1 billion, $1.5 billion. And I think at the very least you have to do it. That could be a one-sentence bill that saves $1.5 billion over there and puts us on a better footing. I think you could go further and instead of assessing people more of a postal charge if they live 20 miles down a dirt road, simply just have less frequent delivery. And I think that alone would be tolerable. They'd still have personal service, but it would be less frequent. And I think you could make up for a large amount of your shortfall if you went actually below 5 days for some very rural areas. It's been contested, or it's been said that some of your competitors you use the post office for the last mile delivery, and that we don't charge them an adequate amount. They're sort of using the post office, the subsidized last mile delivery. Is that a problem? Do we charge your competitors enough when they get a package shipped to an area and then they use the post office for the last mile? Is that competitively bid? Do you think that's a problem? Should we do anything to fix that?
So Senator, if I may, when I first came here, when I first got this assignment, that was an obvious thing to me. Cut back 5 days, 4 days, whatever. And as I've worked through the process and researched and studied the organization, I think the 6-day delivery, the connection that the postal letter carrier has with the American people, that gives us this highly trusted brand, and where the economy is going in the future, I think that is probably our biggest strength to capitalize on. We talk about $1.5 billion to take a day away. I'm sitting here on a transportation schedule change that could get us $2 or $3 billion, all right, and improve service and improve the connection to the American people. So there are lots of
I'll believe that when I see it. I don't doubt you, but I do doubt government and the post office history. So what about the last mile delivery by your competitors? Are we getting a market rate from them?
We are studying the so I don't believe, my general view, I've been here 60 days and I've looked at that. There are, we make broad-based deals across the whole country that deal with average rates. There are areas that we could push them up, and we're studying that. I don't believe that on the surface it's not the it's reasonable business gaps that may exist is how I describe it.
All right. Well, thanks for trying to fix sort of a perhaps unfixable problem, and hang in there. And just the partisan barbs, hopefully they will be portrayed for what they are, partisan barbs that really aren't trying to fix anything, but they're just doing electoral politics by way of attacking you. So I apologize for that from our colleagues across the aisle, and wish you the best. Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Senator Paul. Senator Romney, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me, Mr. Chairman?
Loud and clear. Go ahead.
Good, thank you. Look, I want to begin by expressing my appreciation to the thousands upon thousands of letter carriers. And I also want to note as well that the postal workers have made our vote-by-mail system in Utah a reliable and a very successful system, I think, for the entire nation. Mr. DeJoy, assuming as I do that you've been truthful in your testimony today, I can imagine how frustrating it is to be accused of political motives in your management responsibility. At the same time, of course, you can surely understand that there have been pretty good reasons for people to think that you or your colleagues are purposefully acting to suppress voting, or that you're going to purposely prevent ballots from being counted. And any surprise at such concerns has to be tempered by the fact that the president has made repeated claims that mail-in voting will be fraudulent, and that he doesn't want to get more money to the post office because without more money, you can't have universal mail-in voting. Putting that aside, let me note that a great deal has been made of the fact that you contributed to President Trump's campaign. I would note that you also generously contributed to my campaign. So some people would say that you've contributed to both sides. Let me turn that and just note. Let me note that like others today, I state the obvious when I say that reliable, valid voting is essential to democracy here, and of course to other places around the world. And particularly with COVID still raging, the mail is essential to our voting system and therefore to democracy. Can you do you have a high degree of confidence that virtually all the ballots that would be mailed, let's say 7 days before an election, would actually be able to be received and counted? I mean, if people vote within 7 days of an election, are they highly confident? Are you highly confident that those ballots would then be received?
Extremely highly confident. We will scour every plant the day, each night leading up to election day. Very, very confident.
I very much appreciate that. That is a commitment. I hope the American people, as they see news reports of this hearing and of others that are going to come in the House, will underscore the fact that if they get their ballots in at least 7 days before an election, and probably even closer to the election than that, but that the person who's running the post office is saying he is highly confident those ballots will be received by the various clerks in a timely way. That's key to us. On a separate topic, you mentioned that there are delays in the system, and that's of course to be expected. Are there greater delays in certain areas than others? So, for instance, are delays greater in rural areas than they are in the rest of the country?
Now, Senator, there's I think more urban areas where the coronavirus, the intimidation of the coronavirus, which scares our employee employee availability average has dropped across the nation about 4%. But when you can go into some of these, what I would say, hot spots, Philadelphia, Detroit, they're as much as 25%. And we have routes. We have, like, Philadelphia has 750 routes, and we have days where we're short 200 carriers, and this can go on for a while. So that's where that's not the only contribution, but that's when the American people see 2-3 days that they haven't seen their carrier, that's an issue. And I would say I think there's at least 20 of those around in descending, level of consequence around the country.
Yeah, thank you. I will just stand by saying, like a number of my colleagues who've already expressed this point, I would very much look forward to seeing, and I'm not talking about by Sunday, I just mean at some point, seeing a plan developed by someone of your expertise in logistics for how we can get the post office to be more economically managed, but at the same time maintain a level of service which is essential for a functioning economy, and that's a real challenge. But as someone who's done what you've done throughout your career, I expect you to be up to the task. And like Senator Paul, I am anxious for there to be a recognition on the part of Congress that for us to demand certain service levels may require us to make legislative changes. So please feel welcome in our committee or in the House for letting us know what we need to do to make sure that you can do the job that we've asked you to do. Thank you, Mr. DeJoy. Appreciate your service.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Senator Romney. Senator Enzi.
Really appreciate you, Chairman Johnson, for holding this hearing. And I especially appreciate the Postmaster General coming to this hearing, knowing what kind of a target he will be. It's got to be really difficult only being in office 60 days and being expected to solve all of the problems of the Postal Service. It's been in a crisis for many years. Senator Collins used to head this committee when it wasn't called Homeland Security. It was Government Affairs, and she has worked on the post office all of that time and has a pretty good bill that she's worked on with Senator Feinstein that I hope people will take a look at. I'm not sure that anything can be done in a bipartisan way, particularly if one of the participants, Susan Collins, is up for election, because that might help her in her campaign. But she's been dedicated to this. It isn't a new idea that she had. It's something that she's been working on, and it has a lot of good ideas in it. I feel I really appreciate postal workers. In Wyoming, particularly, they're doing an outstanding job in spite of all of the difficulties of the pandemic. My father-in-law was a postal worker, and he was before the mail sorting machines, and he was pleased that he was able to memorize all the zip codes in the Sheridan area and handle the sorting. Of course, now local mail isn't postmarked locally. These are problems. I didn't realize that you personally deliver everything, that you personally fix the sorting machines. It was all news to me. And detailed analysis, how much detailed analysis can you do in 60 days, particularly as I suspect that maybe people aren't wanting to share information with you. I hope that those postal workers out there that are dedicated will actually do something to help out on it. And of course, you've been accused of picking on veterans and picking on seniors. And I have to admit that I have felt picked on, not by you, but by the Postal Service recently. And I was glad to hear your explanation that you're having some difficulty with people to deliver the mail in light of the pandemic. I don't think a lot of people understand that. I didn't understand that. But I know that we had a package that we were expecting that was being traced, and we paid extra to have it traced. And we know it sat in the D.C. post office for 11 days before it was delivered to us. There have been days that our mail wasn't picked up. So I'm glad to know that the reason behind that, and to find out, this is the big surprise, it wasn't you. I thought you caused all of that. Mail sorting machines. In Wyoming, I don't think we sort any mail in Wyoming anymore. All those got moved to other centers. And I thought it was being done pretty efficiently in Wyoming. And what I also learned was that when you move a sorting center under the union requirements, if the people don't want to move, they don't have to move, and they still get paid. That's not going to save any money. I've asked for the analysis on some of these changes that have drastically affected Wyoming, and which, of course, were not done under you. It was done under previous administrations. And I know that they want to save money, but they've got to do some analysis that will actually save money. You used to be able to put money in a collection box, or put an envelope in a collection box for local delivery, and they got it the next day. Now, you put it in my community for local delivery. It goes to Denver first, gets sorted, and comes back to Gillette. Sometimes postmarked in Denver. That's not good management. And as an accountant, I know that postmarks make a difference. So I'm concerned. I have a lot of concerns, and I'm only pointing these out because I know that you only had 60 days to work on them, and your plate was already full. But I'm trying to fill it a little bit more. And again, appreciate that you're willing to take on this. I guess you'd have to call it an adventure, not a job, because it would be too tough as a job. But I know you've made some sacrifices to get to this. I hope that you will take a look at the urban areas. We've been picked on in the rural areas for a long time, but we have some really efficient people out here that are dealing with long distances and doing it very well. But when I go to my post office in DC, I find that there's only one person working at the counter. And if the person that comes up to the counter needs a box to mail it in, the boxes are not out where people can actually get them. So the person behind the counter has to leave and go get a box. And when they bring the box back, it still has to be sealed and addressed. And they don't move them over to the side to see if they can wait on the next customer. Everybody waits at social distancing. I've been to the post office before during my lunch hour and found that the postal workers decided that was their lunch hour as well. No business lets their employees sit down and eat in front of customers during their lunch hour. Well, enough of my I guess trying to defend you here, but
Senator, thank you. Senator, if I may, and thank you for the support. But if I may, the day I take the seat, as with any organization, the day you become the CEO, you're responsible for everything that goes on around you, and I have big enough shoulders to deal with that. But but more important about what you said in the beginning about legislation, not moving. We, the organization, needs to, and this board, we will move forward. We have to, because without legislation, without any assistance, we will run out of money. And 9 months, 12, we talk about a 633,000 person organization and 9 months worth of cash, and everybody thinks we're okay. That's outrageous thinking. And so we need to, we will, and that's kind of the difference now. When we are moving, as I said in my opening remarks to the Board of Governors, we will do what we need to do to stay, to meet our operating objectives and get to self-sustaining, manner. So thank you.
I appreciate your willingness to be here, and I hope that you will take a look at the Collins-Feinstein bill and give us some analysis on that. And I recognize that you have to rely on the postmasters across the United States of doing their job to manage their own business. So thank you for taking this job.
Thanks. Thank you, Senator Enzi. Senator Hawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. DeJoy, for being here. Let me see if I can ask a few questions to get started that will maybe help clear out some of this misinformation that we have heard repeated over and over and over again in the media, and some of it echoed today. Just to be clear, will USPS have enough cash on hand to support operating expenses through the November election?
Yes, sir.
Has the Postal Service seen an increase actually in total operating revenues in the most recently reported quarter relative to last year?
Yes, sir. Small, but yes.
Has the Postal Service seen its overall cash on hand position increase since the start of the pandemic in March to a level of approximately 15 billion? Is that right?
Somewhere between 14 and 15 billion. Yes.
So if I've understood your testimony correctly today, what I've heard you say and also what I've read in your written testimony, your testimony to us is that the Postal Service has the wherewithal, it has the resources, it has what it needs in order to deliver the mail safely and on time through the November election. Just to be clear about that, is that right?
So yes, Senator. There's two separate things, though. To deliver on the election and cash to operate the business in the future are two separate things. But yes, we have plenty of cash to operate for the election.
Yeah, now just on that second point, since you bring it up, what's your estimate of the amount of additional assistance that you require as you look toward the future, past November and into the months and years to come?
I think we have had, the biggest thing we need is legislative reform and the PRC to decide. But I estimated about $10 billion. We estimate about $10 billion cost on the COVID expense side. And what I would like to see is the note that we have negotiated with Treasury be used to get long-term financing to buy new vehicles.
Can I just ask you about that since you bring up the note from Treasury? So the CARES Act authorized $10 billion in borrowing authority. I understand that you reached USPS and the Treasury Department came to an agreement late last month in principle over what that would be, what that would look like. Can you give us a sense of when this $10 billion that was authorized, it's a loan, when this is likely to be made available to you, what you see its utility as? Just give us an update on where that stands.
So we have terms of agreement, and all we would need to do is when we request it, get a final document on it. But the terms have been agreed. I mean, the issue here with borrowing money is you need to know how you're going to pay it back. And at this particular point, we're evaluating that, but it is available to us pretty quickly.
And what do you anticipate using it for in the near term, assuming that you do avail yourselves of it?
There's pretty specific limitation. I cannot use it for capital, but I can use it to cover operating costs that are closely associated with COVID, and we can identify that pretty easily.
Now, you said just a second ago, when you first introduced the topic of the loan, you said that you would like additional authority to perhaps use the loan toward vehicles or as collateral for vehicles. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, so we have, you probably know, we have many 30-year-old vehicles and that we're desperately in need of new vehicles. The loan is not for capital. I would like to see the term extended and used as a capital type equipment loan to buy vehicles and other types of modernization efforts that we have. But longer term than 5 years.
Very good. And so that is part of the additional legislative reforms or authorizations you seek. Am I understanding you correctly?
Yes, sir. And
got it. Go ahead.
It's already been passed in a committee a couple of years ago, what we're looking for.
Right. Understood. Let's come back to some of the reforms that you had recently implemented. To what degree were any of the changes that you implemented over the summer a response to the OIG's recent findings?
I consider the OIG's recent findings as we were doing our own analytics, I thought they were, for somebody new coming in, I thought they were a remarkable gift in terms of just laying out the two things with that. The system was out of balance. The transportation system, 40,000 trucks a day were running. Once you get below, below 90%, you can't depend on anything, right? So that was, and then there was a cost gift. So both things, when I came in here, looking at where the organization was headed financially, and what was the thing we could balance around that getting that transportation network aligned, which we will do, and saving $1 billion, $1.5 billion to $2 billion, which we can reach for, was a Christmas present. I was elated.
Very good. Let me just ask you here. I see my time has almost expired, but let me just ask you in conclusion. I mean, as you probably know, my home state of Missouri, we have a very significant percentage of our population in rural areas. It's the part of the state that I'm from, where I grew up. It is absolutely vital to me that any Postal Service reform going forward continue to preserve the network of rural delivery service, that it preserves the existing delivery and post office box services that are available throughout rural Missouri. So can I just ask you, are you committed to protecting rural delivery and rural post offices for people like the folks I represent in Missouri and around the country?
Sir, we have an unbelievable asset in our letter carriers reaching every American each day. And I commit to trying to strengthen that relationship across the country.
Very good. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. DeJoy. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Hawley. Before I go to Senator Sinema, based on one of the questions in your response from Senator Hawley, you talked about the transportation system just being out of sync. In your written testimony, I just want to make sure that we're talking about the same thing here. You said your on-time trips went from 35,000 per day to 39,000 per day, which means schedule time of 89% improved to 97%. So is that what you're talking about? Your trucks actually leaving on time to get on their routes? And is that been part of the disruption as well? As if the letters aren't getting to those trucks in time, they may be left behind for next day's delivery. Can you just expand, just explain that, clarify that a little better?
Yes. So there, inside the plants, there's a production schedule for mail that would meet that's set up to meet a dispatch schedule for trucks that gets tied to a destination center for, let's just say, keep it simple, go right to the delivery units where carriers go out in the morning and carriers then could come back at night. This whole thing is an aligned schedule in theory on paper, and there's lots of imbalances that we're finding as we went through this process. But the big thing to try and get everything aligned around is that transportation schedule. And now we have taken that up, and all that mail that was going that was on that truck was also late mail. Right now, we have advanced the mail. Some of the mail that coming off the processing lines. We found these imbalances, and we did not as great a job as we should in recovering for it, but we will. I'm seeing improvements right now. Once that comes together, mail will be moving around the country at 97% on time. And I'm very, very excited and committed to trying to do that. And that, again, enables us to balance the front end and the back and the delivery end of the system, and saves us all that money that you saw in the audit report. And it's in billions, not in millions.
So as a former manufacturer, I realize if you don't have a good process, you don't have a good product. So you came in and you identified some real process breakdowns. In a very short period of time, you made a pretty dramatic improvement in terms of on-time dispatch level, in terms of that transportation system. Now, you obviously have COVID, which is affecting our entire economy, and obviously it affects the postal system as well. So, basically what I'm hearing out of your testimony is the delivery delays are primarily being caused by the issues related to COVID, but the changes you made in terms of process, certainly in theory, if it hadn't already improved it already, is certainly going to set you up for improvement and cost reductions and cost savings in the future.
Yeah, so a substantial portion of our delays are related to COVID. I won't go as far as to not say that we had maybe a 4 or 5% hit on our service level for delayed all sorts of mail, marketing mail, everything, because it got stuck on a dock, and we're drastically bringing that down. And once that is aligned, we should have a smooth, running system at a much more high performance rate.
Okay, so some instructions do the change, but again, those changes are necessary to drive cost savings and improvement in the future.
This is very doable. So FedEx and UPS do it.
Okay, great. Senator Cinnamon.
Thank you, Chairman, for holding this important hearing, and I want to thank Postmaster General DeJoy for joining us today. The U.S. Postal Service has always been a critical lifeline for communities across Arizona and the entire nation. And during this pandemic, it's even more true. Over the past week, my office has heard from over 18,000 Arizonans about the importance of the Postal Service. Arizonans want to ensure the Postal Service will continue to deliver prescription drugs, assist small businesses, and support their right to vote. Arizona has led the way on safe and secure mail-in voting for years. The Postal Service must act to support our upcoming election, especially since we will see increases in vote by mail due to the pandemic. But our hearing today shouldn't just be about election mail. My constituents have also shared stories about prescriptions that took so long to arrive, they worry whether the medication is spoiled. Others are concerned their small business will go under without reliable postal service, or that rent checks and bill payments now take a week longer to reach their destination than just a few months ago. So, Mr. DeJoy, I'm pleased that you heeded requests from me and my colleagues to answer questions about the operational services the Postal Service is making. It's critical that you and your team demonstrate a commitment to protecting the ability of customers to get the service they rely on every day. And successfully communicating with Congress, stakeholders, and election officials is a big part of that effort. So for my first question, in Arizona, we expect 85 to 90% of the electorate to vote by mail this general election. That's approximately 2.4 million ballots moving through the postal network in Arizona in the weeks before the election. Given that significant volume, unexpected challenges will certainly arise and adjustments will need to be made. I've been working closely with the Arizona Secretary of State's office to ensure that they and other local election officials get their questions answered regarding mail issues so that we can have fair elections. And I'm going to continue to share the full range of questions that my office receives with you and your team. And of course, their top concern is the timely delivery of ballots. So will local postal managers be authorized to make decisions and have postal employees make extra trips or late trips, work overtime in order to deliver ballots to ensure that plants and post offices don't fall behind in processing election mail?
Yes, ma'am. Effective October 1st, we will have redundant resources and liberalization and aggressive efforts to make sure everything is moving and flowing timely.
I appreciate that. Could you tell me what steps your office is taking to communicate this policy to postal managers, election officials, stakeholders, and to the public in Arizona so everyone feels confident that citizens have fair access to voting by mail?
Yes, ma'am. In general, I think we started back in February. We've reached out. We've had over 50,000 contacts with the election officials around the country. As you know, we've sent a number of letters. We are making videos that will go online with the union leadership and myself to communicate out our commitment, to this, and we continue to work with the state boards and our board. We decided to put together a bipartisan committee on the board to kind of oversee everything that we're going to be doing. So we are emphasizing. In fact, I think in September we're going to send a letter to every American with what our process is going out to every American citizen. So I think I feel good. I appreciate the question, and I feel good about what the whole organization, from the board of directors down to our letter carriers and plant personnel. We're very, very proud of what we're doing, and we're going to deliver for the American people.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate it. Postal processing plants are the critical piece to ensure that everyday mail arrives in a timely fashion and that all the votes are counted. And so we want to make sure those processing plant operations remain smooth and efficient. Earlier this week in your announcement, you said you would not close any postal processing facilities before the election. But I don't think you specifically ruled out consolidations of processing plants. So my question is the Postal Service planning to modify or reduce capacity at any postal processing facilities before the election? And if so, what specific steps are you taking to ensure that the Postal Service can continue to meet service standards for both election and regular mail in the communities served by those facilities?
Senator, I promise you, we are not making any changes until after the election.
I appreciate that. That was a very concise and direct answer. I love it. As you know, I recently wrote to you regarding the Cherry Bell processing plant in Tucson. It's very important to mail service in that community and throughout Arizona. If the Postal Service considers consolidations or closures of processing facilities in the future, would you require new area mail processing studies for any impacted facility or other similar analysis before moving forward with a consolidation or a closure?
Thank you, Senator. There is and I'm not totally familiar with it, but there is a whole process a pretty detailed process that we need to go through before we close a facility. And we'll take that down. If that facility ever gets on that, I'll make sure we reach out to you in advance and let you know. But there is a whole public awareness process, a detailed analysis as to how the mail is going to be processed. It's not an easy thing to do. But we have it marked down, and we'll keep you posted if that ever gets on our list of interested locations.
I appreciate that. Just for your awareness, the original AMP for Cherry Bell was done in 2011. And as you're probably aware, we've had very significant population growth throughout Arizona since then. So we want to make sure that decisions are made with up-to-date data. And so I'll follow up with you soon about this topic because this is very important for Arizona and it's very important for Southern Arizona in particular. Mr. Chairman, go ahead. Go ahead, Mr. Joy.
Just said, look forward to speaking to you about it.
Thank you. I know my time is almost done. The last thing I'll just say is when you next consider operational changes, I'd ask you to take into account the negative customer experiences that folks have shared with us, like spoiled medicine or missing rent checks. We've been getting more complaints about service getting worse since some of these most recent changes. We ask that you would take into account these negative customer experiences when making decisions in the future. And my team is happy to share some of those direct experiences with you.
Thank you for your guidance, ma'am. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for being with us today. And Mr. Chairman, thank you for this opportunity, and I yield back.
Well, thank you, Senator Sinema. Well, let me just, again, thank you, Mr. Postmaster General, for appearing here on pretty short notice and subjecting yourself to this hearing process. Just to quick summarize a few things we heard today. Obviously, the postal system is every bit as affected by COVID as the rest of this nation. Has been economically devastating. So I think for anybody to assume that service would maintain its high level of standards when we're in the midst of a pandemic, I think is quite unrealistic. As you've stated, I think the operational changes that you implemented are designed for long-term improvement, but they created some disruptions as well. But again, coming from a manufacturing background, I realize you have to have a good process. Things have to run on time, and you recognize that as well. So I'm highly supportive of those efforts. I think that should be commended, not condemned. As I stated, there's no doubt there have been some unusual delays, COVID, some of these operational changes, but as I check with our constituent service folks, what they are also finding is the high volume of calls concerning postal complaints. The vast majority seem very highly scripted. Like this could be a very well-organized effort, which doesn't surprise me in the slightest. There are fundraising emails from Senate candidates and Senate and the Democrat Senatorial Committee dating back as far as April, complaining about this postal issue. So I have no doubt the Democrats are ginning these issues and these problems up into something that it's not. A very false narrative, as I said, designed to extract a political advantage. And, you know, Mr. Postmaster General, I'm just very sorry that you are on the targeting end of this political hit piece. I think it's very unfortunate. It's very tragic. This is, as somebody else pointed out, this is part of the problem why we've not had postal reform, is how people will take advantage of it. And again, the expectations, I appreciated Senator Ensley's very common sense a statement of a number of different facts. You've only been on the job 60 days. You've got a great background. I truly appreciate your willingness to serve this role. As you heard from the committee, we truly appreciate the hard work of the men and women of the U.S. Postal Service doing a good job delivering our mail. But we need reforms moving forward. So we might have an opportunity here. There may be another COVID relief package. It probably will include something for postal. So if there's going to be dollars allocated, what I'm certainly asking you for is the information, the data, and the suggestions for true reforms. I think that's what's always been lacking as I've been in this position in terms of postal reform. It's always a taxpayer bailout absent of the types of reforms that we need to also make legislatively. So I really look for your guidance. I look for your data. It's another real shortcoming from my dealing with the U.S. Postal Service here. We just don't get the data that I think we really need to enact effective legislation. I'd like to actually enact effective legislation that's going to require cooperation with you and the postal workers. So again, thank you for your service. Thank you for stepping in this role. I apologize for the fact that you become a target in a political hit job. It's very unfortunate. But with that,
Mr. Chairman,
yeah, certainly.
Would you yield to me for a minute or two, please?
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks so much. As you may recall, Mr. Chairman, one of our colleagues, late Tom Colbert, and I worked for years on major changes in the Postal Service, real reforms. And we've done that. We've developed bipartisan consensus around that. And we can do that again. Among things that we've heard here today, there's an interest in Medicare integration. I think we ought to look at that. There's an acknowledgement that there need to be major investments in the fleet, the postal fleet. The average age of the fleet of postal vehicles is 27 years old. There are investments that need to be made for additional modern package processing equipment in our distribution centers across the country. And I think there's the ability to come up with a bipartisan consensus on how to help the Postal Service not just get through a pandemic, but be relevant and efficient and vibrant in the years to come. The secret to vibrant democracy, the 2 C's: communicate and compromise. And with all due respect to our Postmaster General, I'm pretty good at bipartisan compromise. I reached out to you when you were just initially selected by the Postal Board of Governors. And then later on, I tried to reach you again and again for weeks and couldn't even get a call back. And I wasn't the only one. You got to be willing to communicate. You got to be willing to communicate. There's some people in the administration who do a great job at that. Bob Lighthizer, a trade representative, is one. Mnuchin, Secretary of Treasury, is one. And I would urge you to emulate them. This is a shared responsibility. It's not on the post office. It's not on the men and women who work at the Postal Service. It's not on the Board of Governors or on you as a postmaster. It's on us as well. This is a shared responsibility. Our country is counting on us. And we're counting on our democracy. Last thing I'll mention, I go back to Ben Franklin, first Postmaster General. Remember what he said coming out of that building at the end of the Constitutional Convention when they said, "What have you done here? What have you created?" And he said, "A republic, if we can keep it. A republic, if we can keep it." And one of the keys to keeping it is, frankly, a vibrant Postal Service and the ability for people to vote, Democrat, Republican, or whatever, for people to cast their votes and know they're going to be counted. That's critical. We've got a president, sadly, who wants to undermine, underfund the Postal Service, and undermine the ability to do vote by mail. That's just unacceptable. Hopefully, we can do better than that. And I commit for myself, some of my colleagues to try to do just that. Do better. We can always do that. In order to form a more perfect union, we can do better.
Mr. Chairman, if I could say a few comments too, just briefly.
Senator Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Postmaster DeJoy, I want to take an opportunity to thank you as well for appearing before us so willingly and certainly on very short notice. But I also want to be very clear about what I've been hearing, and I think you've heard from my members, and just to counter a little bit of what the chairman said, these are real concerns that I'm hearing. These are not manufactured. These are people who are coming forward, talking about delays, talking about medicine that's not available for them, talking about how I have this, I shared the story with an individual who did, because of the lack of medicine, skipped doses and was actually hospitalized. Those are very real. And when I hear those kinds of stories, we stand up. That's my job. It's a job of every senator here to stand up and for our constituents, for the people back home who are being hurt, and make sure that their voice is heard. That's what this is about. It's about making sure people's voices are heard. And that is what this hearing's about. This is why we're standing up and making sure the Postal Service does what they have done with incredible integrity and professionalism for 245 years. We want to make sure that that standard continues going forward. I fully appreciate that the COVID has created significant problems for the Postal Service, but I won't show my chart again. But if you look at the chart, the service was there through a lot of the pandemic. It's just been in the middle of July where you see it dropping off dramatically. The COVID's been with us since March, but we've seen a dramatic drop since mid-July, which is the time when I got all of those communications, and my colleagues have been getting those communications. They're not manufactured. These are real people.
Some of them certainly are.
So I just want to be clear about that. So, Mr. Postmaster DeJoy, you answered some of our questions today, and I thank you for that. But there's still many, many left that are unanswered, and I think we all look forward to seeing the documents that we have requested so we can do our oversight function, deliver to us in a timely fashion. I appreciate your willingness to do that. I'm going to continue my investigation of the recent delays and Postal Service practices that have been put in place. And I urge you and your staff to be fully forthcoming with any additional requests. That kind of transparency is critically important in this job. I know you have a very hard job. And frankly, I think you've made it harder on yourself because of the lack of transparency that we have seen here these last few weeks. So in the coming weeks, Congress certainly must provide Postal Service with the resources and the oversight that you need to reliably deliver mail for the American people, but not just through this election. We have to make sure we get through the election. We've got to get through the pandemic, and we want to make sure we put the Postal Service on sound financial footing to last for another 245 years and beyond. So thank you again, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Senator Peters. And again, I am in no way, shape, or form denying that many of these complaints are absolutely genuine, and we take these seriously and help our constituents. But there's also no doubt that a lot of this is being ginned up. Many of those complaints are highly scripted, and it's being done for political purpose. I mean, there's absolutely no doubt about that. We have a new Postmaster General who's been in the office less than 70 days. You know, from my standpoint, I think the first thing he needed to do is get up. Start the job, roll up his shirt sleeves, and get to work and try and figure out what he needs to do to reform the process. So I'm looking forward to a totally transparent process here. I'm looking to separate the fact from the fiction. And my problem is there's a lot of fiction, a lot of false narrative being ginned up by Democrats and the left right now. So I want the data as well. Mr. Postmaster General, I'm sure you will work with us in the future, and that's what I'm basically giving you the opportunity to do. There's a possibility for a postal reform bill, even in this next COVID relief package, if there is one. So let's work in good faith. Thank you again for your service. Thank the men and women of the United States Postal Service for their service as well. The hearing record will remain open for 15 days until September 3rd at 5 p.m. for the submission of statements and questions for the record. This hearing is adjourned.
Thank you.